Felix Caruso did not expect to spend his Wednesday evening bleeding onto the linoleum floor of a hotel housekeeping closet held in place by a woman in a grey uniform who had just dislocated his wrist with the calm efficiency of someone folding a fitted sheet. He had walked into the Alderton Grand that afternoon to remind the management that their protection arrangement was 30 days past due. He had brought 2 of his men. He had not brought enough men. Her name was Patrice Odom. She was 26 years old, wore a housekeeping uniform 2 sizes too large because the hotel only stocked smalls and mediums, and she had been pushing a linen cart down the 14th floor corridor when the trouble started. She was not supposed to be an obstacle. She was supposed to be furniture. Caruso Syndicate had controlled the Alderton Grand's protection arrangement for 11 years. The hotel's general manager, a sweating man named Gerald, paid an envelope on the 1st of every month and never asked questions. It was a clean, quiet relationship. Then Gerald retired in March, and the new manager, young MBA, convinced he understood risk, decided the arrangement was legacy overhead and stopped paying. Felix had given him 60 days. Gerald's replacement had used those 60 days to install new door locks and hire a security consultant who frankly did not understand what he had walked into. Felix was 38 years old. He ran the Caruso family's Eastern Territory with a reputation for surgical precision and very little noise. He did not enjoy violence for its own sake. He found it inefficient. What he enjoyed was leverage, the quiet application of pressure in exactly the right place until something bent. He was lean and dark-suited and possessed of a particular stillness that most people found immediately unsettling. He was not prepared for Patrice Odom. The sequence of events that led to Felix bleeding in a linen closet began on the 14th floor, where his associate Marco had made the mistake of grabbing the new security consultant by the collar to make a point. Patrice had been 3 feet away, cart parked against the wall, changing out the cart's soiled linens for fresh. She had watched Marco grab the consultant. She had set down her stack of pillowcases. She had stepped across the hallway. Felix would replay the next 4 seconds many times and still not fully understand them. Patrice had not screamed. She had not hesitated. She had walked directly to Marco, who outweighed her by perhaps 40 pounds of muscle, and had done something with her left hand to his wrist that produced a sound like a green branch snapping, followed immediately by Marco's knees hitting the carpet. Then she had looked at Felix's other associate, a man named Trace, who had never once in 7 years of employment failed to intimidate a civilian, and Trace had taken 2 full steps backward without appearing to consciously decide to do so. Felix had looked at this woman, broad-shouldered, round-faced, wisps of hair escaping from under her uniform cap, breathing through her nose like she had just done something only mildly inconvenient, and he had said the wrong thing. "You have any idea who you just put your hands on?" Patrice had looked at him with eyes the color of dark coffee and said, flatly, "Man came in here to threaten people at my job. I don't much care who he works for." Well then, the security consultant, apparently operating on the adrenaline of a man who had just watched someone else save his life, had lunged for his radio. Patrice grabbed Felix by the jacket lapel and the back of his belt, opened the linen closet door, and put him inside it with a velocity that genuinely surprised him. That was how Felix Caruso, head of the Eastern Caruso Territory, ended up sitting on a shelf of towels in the dark, pressing a clean washcloth to the side of his head, listening to Patrice Odom tell his associate Trace to take Marco to urgent care and not come back tonight. Pulled the closet door open. The light from the corridor fell across Felix's face. He was not unconscious. He was not even, technically, badly hurt. He was deeply, profoundly off balance, which was a sensation so foreign to him that he had not yet identified what it was. "You're bleeding," Patrice said, with approximately 0 sympathy. "Finn, I'm aware." Reached past him, pulled a fresh washcloth from the shelf, and held it out. He took it. "You going to call the police?" Felix asked. "No." Why not? Patrice leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. She filled the doorway in a way that made it clear she was not leaning on it for support, but simply choosing to occupy that space because it suited her. Because I've been working in hotels for 6 years, and I know what a protection arrangement looks like. This hotel has had one since before I got here, Ingrid. Whatever's going on between you and Gerald's replacement, I don't need the police crawling through my workplace for the next 3 months while they figure it out. Felix looked at her. That's a very considered response for someone who just assaulted a member of an organized crime family. You came into my workplace and grabbed my coworker, Patrice said. I responded to that. The organized crime part wasn't my problem until you made it my problem. And studied her in the thin light from the corridor. She was not performing bravery. That was what struck him. People who were pretending to be unafraid had a particular quality, a brightness in the eyes, a very slight oversteadiness of voice, the body braced for something. Patrice had none of that. She was simply standing in a doorway, having put 2 of his men on the floor. Talking to him like this was a scheduling inconvenience. You've done this before, Felix said. It wasn't a question. Things shifted behind her eyes. Not fear, something older than fear. Come out of the closet, she said. You want to have a conversation? We'll have it somewhere I can see both ends of the hallway. Followed her to the housekeeping station at the end of the corridor. A small room with a utility sink and a row of metal hooks for carts. She ran cold water over a clean cloth and handed it to him without ceremony. Felix pressed it against the cut above his eyebrow. The hotel's not going to pay you, Patrice said, pulling her cart inside and beginning to reload it with efficiency. The new manager is 29 years old. He thinks he's smarter than the situation he's in. He'll keep not paying until something burns, and then he'll tell his board it was unforeseeable. Felix watched her work. She folded a stack of hand towels in thirds without looking at them. You know a lot about how this works for a housekeeper. I notice things, Patrice said. It's a job requirement. You're in the rooms, you're invisible, people talk. Indian, what have you noticed about this hotel? Patrice glanced at him, a long look appraising. Why would I tell you that? Cos, Felix said carefully, I have a problem here that is getting messier than I prefer. And you apparently have functional intelligence and the ability to incapacitate trained men, which means you are considerably more interesting than you appear. I appear to be a housekeeper. Yes, and I appear to be a man who controls a significant portion of this city's commercial security arrangements. Appearances are where we started this conversation, and they've already been revised once. Patrice stopped folding. She turned to look at him directly. Up close, in better light, he saw that she was younger than he'd assumed during the chaos of the corridor. Mid-20s, smooth, dark skin, a small scar on her chin that had the precise geometry of a healed cut rather than an accident. What exactly are you proposing? I'm not proposing anything, Felix said. I'm having a conversation with someone who surprised me. That doesn't happen often. I'd like to understand how. Patrice was quiet for a moment. She seemed to be calculating something. Then she said, My mother ran a cleaning service, commercial, office buildings, hotels, event spaces. She had 6 employees when she started, and 2 when I was 16. She paid protection for 4 years to a crew out of the Delma district. She resumed folding. She didn't pay because she wanted to. She paid because she didn't have a choice. And every time they raised the rate, something broke in her a little more. Felix said nothing. She's retired now. The business is closed. She worked 40 years and came out with a bad back and a studio apartment. Patrice set the folded towels on the cart. I notice things in hotels because I learned from her that you have to understand the whole room, not just the part of it where you're standing. Your mother's crew, Delma District. Who ran it? Patrice looked at him again. Why? 'Cause if they're still operating, they may be one of the reasons my Eastern arrangements have been experiencing interference. Gave him a name. It was a name that made the muscles in Felix's jaw go very tight for a brief, controlled moment. He said, "You're certain?" "A man named Ostrowski to collect every month for 4 years," Patrice said. "I opened the door for him every time because my mother's hands hurt, and she didn't like standing. I remember Ostrowski. I remember who he reported to." She paused. "Do you actually not know that name, or are you testing me?" Felix felt something he was not accustomed to feeling in professional conversations, the sensation of being slightly behind. "Testing you," he said. "You passed." Not smile. "I want something. And I assumed you would. This floor has 22 rooms. I have a co-worker who's been here 12 years. They cut her to part-time last month because the new manager is trimming labor costs. She has 2 kids. She's not going to complain because she needs the health insurance." Patrice met his eyes steadily. "Whatever you work out with the new manager, I want Donna Kreis back on full-time with back pay for the month they cut her. That's my condition for this conversation continuing." Felix studied her. "You're negotiating on behalf of your co-worker." "Yeah, I'm negotiating because I can," Patrice said, "and because I want to. Those are the only reasons anyone should ever negotiate." He agreed to the terms. He agreed to them not because he had to. He was Felix Caruso, and he did not have to agree to anything a hotel housekeeper said to him, but because something about the clarity of her ask made refusing it feel absurd. She hadn't asked for money. She hadn't asked for safety. She had asked for a middle-aged woman with 2 kids to get her hours back, and left the Alderton Grand that night without completing what he'd come to do, which was a first in 11 years of Eastern Territory management. He sat in the back of his car and told his driver to give him a minute. He pressed the clean white washcloth against his eyebrow and stared at the hotel's lit lobby through the tinted glass. He came back the following Tuesday. Not for the manager. The manager issue had been resolved through other channels. Felix had simply reached Gerald, retired, by phone, and Gerald had made a call to his former colleague that produced results within 48 hours. The envelope was on the desk of the new manager's assistant before the end of the week, and the new manager had quietly recategorized the arrangement as legacy vendor relationship in his budget. Felix came back on Tuesday because he had told himself he wanted to follow up on the Delmar district information, which was partially true. The Ostrowski connection had been genuinely useful. His people had spent 3 days pulling on that thread and found 2 overlapping interference points that had been costing him money for 8 months. The other reason he came back was one he examined with the same cool precision he applied to everything else, found it inconvenient, and acknowledged it anyway. He was 43 floors of a major hotel property, deep into being unable to stop thinking about a woman who had put 2 of his men on the floor and then negotiated for her co-workers' benefits. He found her on the 9th floor, and saw him get off the elevator, and her expression did exactly nothing. "Donna's back on schedule," she said. "Full-time starting Monday, back pay in her next check." "No," Felix said, "I insured it." "No, you did." She pushed her cart toward the next room on her list. "Ostrowski's crew. Was it useful?" "Terribly," he said. "We recovered 8 months of interference. Financially, it was a significant correction." "Good." She stopped outside room 914 and knocked twice. Housekeeping. Waited. Knocked again. Then she slid her key card and pushed the door open with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this 10,000 times. She glanced at him over her shoulder. "You going to stand in the hallway or come in so we can talk without the whole floor hearing?" Felix Caruso followed a hotel housekeeper into a room at 9:40 in the morning. To have what he already understood was not going to be the last conversation they would have. Stripped the bed with swift, economical movements while she talked. He had learned by now not to find this disconcerting. "There's something else," she said, "in the Delmar district connection." "Tell me." His boss had a partner 15 years ago. They split the territory and the split was not clean. She bundled the sheets into the laundry bag. The partner's name was Selig, Ray Selig. He went quiet about 10 years ago. Everyone assumed he retired or died. Felix went very still. He didn't retire or die. No, Patrice said. She snapped a clean-fitted sheet over the mattress with a crack like a whip. He moved operations. My mother's second location, the one on the west side, he ran that block under a different name. Never knew she was paying 2 crews. They never told her. She smoothed the sheet with focused, deliberate strokes. He's still running that block. Just under 3 different shell names now. And one of those shells rents commercial kitchen space in a building on Garrett Street. Felix knew that building. He had 2 arrangements on Garrett Street. The implication of what she was telling him landed with the weight of something that had been suspended above him for a long time. You're telling me there's a competing operation 2 blocks from my distribution point that's been there for 10 years and none of my people found it. I'm telling you my mother paid protection twice without knowing it, Patrice said, tucking the sheet corner with practiced precision. And that I spent a lot of years cleaning rooms in a lot of buildings, and I have a very good memory for paperwork I'm not supposed to see. She looked at him across the freshly made bed, direct and entirely unashamed, and been keeping a record. Addresses, names, shell company registrations. I started it when I was 19, after my mother's business closed. I don't entirely know what I thought I was going to do with it. The room was very quiet. Outside the window the city moved. And why are you telling me this? Felix asked. Patrice set down the pillow she was sliding into a fresh case. Because you're the only person I've met in 11 years of collecting this information who might actually do something with it. She held his gaze without blinking. Yawn. My mother worked herself into a bad back and a studio apartment. The people who took a portion of every dollar she made are still out there, running the same game on other women like her. So I've tried twice to take what I know to the police. Once they lost the paperwork. The officer I spoke to transferred precincts the following week. She picked up the pillow again. So, you want what I have, we negotiate terms. What are your terms? Businesses on my mother's old west side block. 3 of them are still paying into Selig's shells. They stop. Permanently. She finished the pillow and set it precisely against the headboard. And you stay out of my way. I don't want protection. I don't want money. I don't want to be inside your organization. I want to come to work, do my job and go home without anyone from any crew ever putting their hands on anyone in this building again. Felix sat down slowly in the chair by the window. He was a man who made decisions in the same way he did everything else. With precision, without rushing, and with a clear understanding of what he was trading. He understood what she was offering. The Selig information alone was worth considerable resources to him. Yes, sir. The record she'd been keeping for 7 years was potentially more valuable than anything his own intelligence network had produced in that time, because she'd compiled it from a position no one watched. Invisible. He was the one who had said it. You're not afraid of me, he said. Patrice sat on the edge of the bed she'd just made, which he suspected she wouldn't normally do, but she seemed to want to be at eye level with him. I've been afraid before, she said. I know what it feels like. This isn't it. What is this then? Took a moment. I'm tired, she said. Not of the job, of watching people like my mother get worn down by the same 10 people in the same 10 buildings, and nobody does anything about it because it's just the way it is. She looked at him steadily. You're not a good man. I'm not going to pretend you are. But you're effective, and you're here, and right now, effective, and here is what I need. And something shifted in Felix's chest that he did not immediately have a name for. He said, the West Side Block, the 3 businesses, done. Selig's shells will be dissolved before the end of the month, and no replacement arrangement will be established in their place. You have my word as a Caruso. Your word means something. In matters of business, it means everything, he said. I've built 11 years of territory on it. Patrice looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood, picked up her laundry bag, and walked to the door. She paused there, hand on the frame, back to him. The morning light through the window fell across the grey of her uniform, and Felix thought she looked, from that angle, like someone who had been carrying a very heavy thing for a very long time and was only now deciding whether to set it down. "Yeah, I'll bring you what I have on Selig," she said. "Tonight there's a diner on Marchette Street called Cora's. It's open until 2. I know it." "o'clock," she said. "Don't bring your men." She glanced at him over her shoulder one more time, and Felix. It was the first time she'd used his name. He noticed. "Down. Across from me tonight," she said. "Remember that I have 7 years of documentation and a very good memory. I'm not one of your arrangements. I'm not asking for your protection. I'm giving you information because it aligns with what I want done. The moment it stops aligning, I walk." She held his gaze. "Nod if you understand me." He gave a slow nod. The door closed behind her. Felix Caruso sat alone in a Maid hotel bedroom on the 9th floor of the Alderton Grand, looking at the city through the window. He had come here 8 days ago to collect a debt. He was leaving with something considerably more complicated, and for the first time in a long while, he was not certain that complicated was a problem. He arrived at Cora's at 7:53. He sat in the booth by the back window, declined coffee, and waited. At 8 o'clock exactly, Patrice Odom walked through the front door in regular clothes. Dark jeans, a yellow sweater, hair loose around her face, and Felix understood with a sudden, unpleasant clarity that the last 8 days had not been about the Selig information at all. Or rather, not only about that, slid into the booth across from him and set a manila envelope on the table. "Everything's organized by year," she said. "Odessa's highlighted. Shell company names on the reference sheet in the back." Didn't touch the envelope. "How long did it take you to compile this?" "Years," she said. "On and off, hotel rooms are quiet at 2 in the morning." "Yo, why didn't you destroy it when the police didn't follow through?" Patrice wrapped both hands around the coffee mug the waitress had just placed in front of her. She looked down at it for a moment. "Because destroying it felt like admitting my mother's 40 years meant nothing," she said quietly. "I couldn't do that." Felix picked up the envelope and placed it in his inside jacket pocket without opening it. "I'll have my people verify the registrations within 72 hours. If the information is what you say it is, and I believe it is, I'll have movement on Selig's operation by the end of next week." "Don't need updates," Patrice said. "I'll know when it's done. I'll hear from the people on that block. You stay in contact with them. I go back once a month, help my mother's old neighbors with whatever they need." She glanced up at him. "Some of them are old, some of them don't have cars. It's not complicated." Felix watched her. The diner was warm and slightly too loud with the sound of plates and the jukebox in the corner playing something from 30 years ago. Patrice seemed entirely unaware of any atmosphere. She was simply a woman sitting in a booth, drinking bad coffee, matter-of-fact as weather. "Can I ask you something?" he said. Raised her eyebrows slightly. Permission granted. "The first day, when you came across the hallway, what made you do it?" Patrice turned her mug in her hands. "Marco grabbed someone at my job," she said, "and he looked at me first, before he did it. The way you look at furniture. Like I wasn't going to be a factor." She took a sip of coffee. "I've been looked at like furniture my whole life. Big girl, works in hotels, doesn't matter. I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to let that calculus be accurate. Whenever someone counts me out before they've counted, I correct the math." "You correct the math," Felix said. "And every time." He was quiet for a moment. The jukebox switched songs. Outside the window, a bus went by with its lights lit yellow in the dark, and Felix watched it pass and thought about the fact that he was sitting in a diner on Marchette Street at 8 in the evening, talking to a hotel housekeeper who had handed him 7 years of intelligence work over bad coffee, and that he did not want the conversation to end. "Tris," he said. Looked at him. "Selig operation will be handled," he said, "and I'll keep my word on the West Side block. But I want to propose something additional. Her eyes were careful. I told you I don't want protection. Not protection, he said. Consultation. There are 12 more blocks in the Eastern Territory where I suspect similar ghost arrangements exist. My own people haven't found them in 8 years. You found one in a hotel room at 2 in the morning over 7 years of looking. He held her gaze. I want access to that perspective. On terms you set, you can walk any time. You maintain your job, your life, your independence. Nothing changes about who you are or what you do. But if you're willing to look and to tell me what you see, the information will be used. Against who? Against the people who've been running ghost arrangements on working people in my territory for a decade, Felix said, which, as it happens, aligns with what you want done. Patrice looked at him for a long time, the kind of look that was doing actual calculation, not performing it. Felix had sat across from lawyers and city officials, and men who had shot other men and lived to eat dinner afterward. He had never felt the weight of being actually assessed the way he did under her gaze. 50% of whatever you recover from Selig's dissolved shells goes to the affected businesses, she said. Not all of it. I'm not naive. But half. Felix said, and a fund, administered independently. 40, and the fund. Blue. Done. May. Patrice nodded once, and the negotiation was over, and neither of them moved to leave. The coffee between them grew less hot. The jukebox played something slow and old that neither of them commented on. Felix Caruso, who had not let himself be surprised twice in the same month since he was 22 years old, looked at the woman across the table from him, and understood that he had already been surprised at least 4 more times tonight than he'd intended. You're going to be a problem for me, he said. He didn't mean it as a complaint. Patrice picked up her coffee mug. The corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile, but close. I've been a problem for people my whole life, she said. They just usually don't figure it out until it's too late. He walked her out at 9:10. The street was cool, and the city hummed its ordinary hum around them, indifferent and enormous. They stood on the sidewalk in front of Cora's, and Felix had the specific, unfamiliar experience of not wanting to say the professional thing. It anyway. I'll be in touch when Selig is confirmed. I'll be at work, Patrice said. She pulled her jacket tighter. 9th floor, probably. I like the view. He walked away down Marchette Street, unhurried, taking up space the way she did everything, with a solidity that didn't ask permission. Felix watched her until she turned the corner. Then he stood on the sidewalk for a moment longer than necessary, his hand resting in his jacket pocket over the manila envelope that had just changed the shape of the next several months of his life. He had come to the Alderton Grand to collect what was owed. He had not expected to find something worth considerably more, hidden in plain sight on a floor he'd never had reason to look at, pushed in a cart through corridors by a woman the world had spent 26 years looking through. Felix Caruso did not make mistakes twice. But as he walked back to his car that night, he found himself thinking that the miscalculation on the 14th floor, the one that had started all of this, was rapidly becoming the most useful mistake he had made in years. I keep thinking about the moment Patrice handed Felix that envelope, not dramatically, not with a speech. She just set it on the table between their coffee cups and waited, the same way she'd spent 6 years setting clean towels on the edge of a tub for people who never looked up to say thank you. Built. Over 7 years, those addresses, those names, those shell company registrations, nobody asked her to do that. Nobody assigned it to her. She did it because she understood something that most people take a lifetime to figure out, which is that doing the right thing and doing the smart thing are not always different things. She watched her mother get worn down by a system designed to stay invisible, and instead of deciding that was just how the world worked, she decided to understand it. Every room she cleaned, every document she wasn't supposed to see, every name she filed away in that careful mind of hers. That was her choosing not to look away. That's what I think about when people tell me that where you start determines where you end up. Nishan. Patrice started with a grey uniform that didn't fit right, and a cart she pushed through corridors where people looked through her like glass. She ended up sitting across from one of the most dangerous men in the city, negotiating terms he agreed to. Not because luck found her, because she had spent years making herself impossible to dismiss, even when the whole world was trying to. There's something in that worth sitting with. The people who changed the rooms in that hotel, who folded the sheets and replaced the soap, and never got a second glance. Patrice knew that invisibility wasn't a limitation. It was information. She understood that before Felix ever walked onto her floor, she had already turned the thing people used to diminish her into the most valuable asset she owned. Felix. I think about him too. He came to collect what he was owed and walked out owing something he hadn't accounted for. He was a man who built 11 years of territory on the principle that leverage is everything. He was right. He just never expected to find it in a housekeeping closet. What undid him wasn't force. It was the moment he stayed honest with himself about what he was seeing. He could have walked out of that hotel and told himself a convenient story. That she got lucky, that it didn't matter, that she was a loose end. A lot of people in his position would have. Instead, he came back. That choice, the willingness to revise what he thought he knew, was the thing that changed everything for both of them. I think that's the quiet center of this whole story. Not the envelope, not the negotiation. It's two people who looked at a situation that most people would have run from, or dismissed or used as an excuse, and instead asked, what can actually be done here? Patrice asked it for 7 years before anyone was in a position to answer. Felix asked it the moment his assumptions stopped working. Most of us never get dramatic moments of reckoning. We get ordinary rooms, ordinary problems, ordinary chances to pay attention or not. Patrice paid attention. She built something patient and real out of years of being overlooked. And when the moment came, she was ready for it. Not because she got lucky, but because she had already done the work. It's the part I can't stop thinking about. She was ready. She had always been ready. The world just finally showed up.